Welcome back to the Revolution of Being podcast with Jess and Angie. Today, we are going to talk about some of our current events. I know oftentimes we like to cycle back through different things that are beneficial to us through healing and self awareness. But today, we want to talk about the reality we're all living in. I think most of us who own a television or have a cellular device or a laptop, or we're paying attention to any kind of articles out there, we see the massive amount of division. And this is nothing new to us, to the world we live in. But it's something Angie and I talk about a lot. We're just talking about, like, oh my gosh, do you see people just losing themselves over all this stuff? And you and I see things very differently. And I would say it's a really cool place to be, because neither of us are really like a slave to any ideology, right? We remain open, I think, as much as two people can be. We're human beings and we have all these thoughts. So of course we're going to have natural gravitations to certain things. But I think you and I also were really open to, we could be wrong. And more so, if we engage in anything, I know for me, and I think for you too, I'm always thinking about, what do I want the outcome of this to be? And putting myself back into, logical thinking instead of reacting from emotion, because that's powerful. And so I'm reminded of a quote that says, the best prisoner is somebody who doesn't know they are. And I feel like that is just really, really, really timely, because that's what all this division is creating. It's creating slaves to an ideology, and it's utilizing the damage we have inside of us to create reactivity, triggers. I mean, what a perfect storm this has all been, because most of us were raised by families that didn't have enough self-awareness to be able to evaluate their own emotions. And so we just pass down this generational trauma, and it lives inside of us, and it's like a tinderbox. So when something happens that challenges our reality, which is skewed because we carry all this damage perceptually, we become very reactionary, and we end up carrying out the mission of the enemy while we're screaming about freedom and justice and morality. We are just slaves to the disgusting underbelly of the powers that are actually puppeteering us. So that's my little rampage about this. And I get really passionate. I have a lot of personal experience with this. And I know, Angie, you do too, because we both have interesting stories. We were on different sides of, let's just say, the political fence entering into 2020. And we became really good friends after that point. And now our conversations are just wildly awesome, because we have these two very different lenses that we used to look through. And here we are, best friends, talking about these things. And my mind is blown by that. So if you guys are here listening and you're like, fringe right, fringe left, I'm sorry to use the word fringe, that might trigger you. Pay attention, because you and I, Angie, we're two people that came from two ends of the spectrum. Here we are. And there's a reason why. So let's talk about what this division is doing.
I mean, oh gosh, so much that there's so many areas we could take this. To your point, 2020 is always such a great example, I think, and will probably be the example of division in our lifetime. When we look back, things are before COVID and after COVID, right? It used to be before Christ and after Christ. Now it's before COVID and after COVID, because the world was really forever changed in COVID. And, we saw, I mean, truly just an incredible amount of psychological warfare happening. And that was in politics, that was in healthcare. I still know families that are divided because they had different ideas of how to protect themselves during COVID, right? And all of us, I truly believe And this is an NLP principle, which is related to hypnosis. If people know NLP, one of the main principles we learn in NLP is the understanding that everybody is doing the best they can with the information they have at the time. Because all of us have these subconscious beliefs. You call them filters or lenses, through which we see the world. And that makes every single one of our viewpoints completely valid. And I think that's what we've really lost in 2020 was the validity of having different opinions, experiences, intuitions on what was happening. And that's carried through, we've seen it only ramp up in intensity with the elections and with everything now happening kind of in global politics. And it's really become this divide and conquer, which if you look at history and how, I think there was I believe it was called The Making of a Tyrant. And it was a documentary on, I want to say Netflix, but maybe it was somewhere else on Amazon. And it talks exactly about how the powers that be work so hard to divide people, because if we're unified, if you and I coming from different political spectrums can come together and say, oh my God, we have so much more in common than we do different, we are a powerful force for good. And that is truly where, the psychological and spiritual warfare has hit an all-time high. And that people are waking up in droves to the fact that maybe there's more beneath the surface than we're being fed. And, I do think social media is a lot of good in that respect. We're hearing different perspectives that perhaps we didn't before. People are taking stances that may seem extreme, but something about them resonates. Or in the other direction, we're like, oof, that doesn't resonate anymore. And we can really see a variety of different perspectives. So I think we're being exposed to information in ways we never could, before really kind of the invention of social media. Yes, we had the internet, but we don't know what we don't know. And so it's really in your face right now, everything that's happening, or rather what we're being fed. And I want to say what we're being fed because all of the media outlets are housed under 6 main companies that own them. And so if you look at different media channels, they're all spewing the same message. There is no independent thought anymore that we have access to within news outlets, which makes it really hard as intelligent, discerning people to really find truth. Because in the modern era, truth has become subjective, and that's really unfortunate because we just don't know anymore. There's just so much confusion happening that, the media plays on emotions, and that's hypnotic. So I do hypnosis for a living. The way that you can create change in someone's brain is by getting them highly emotional and then inserting the information you want, which is some kind of narrative to further that belief set. And that is what's happening. It's mass hypnosis right now. And it has been probably for a lot of humankind, but I think a lot of people are seeing it even more now because of social media, the internet, the rapid spread of information. And I think, because we can look back and see how many discrepancies there were, in 2020. And of course, hindsight is 2020. When we get a little bit out from emotional events, we can gain more information. We can understand kind of what was happening on a bigger scale. And that's not to tell you what you should or shouldn't believe about 2020. I'm not going to tell anybody what that experience was for them because, I was a frontline healthcare worker and I saw some really awful things. And I had a lot of cognitive dissonance because I was seeing really atrocious things in healthcare in terms of people dying from, what we were told was COVID. And I say that because I question all of it now, but we saw people dying really horrific deaths. And then there was this population of people saying, COVID's not real, it's made up, everyone's a sheep if they believe in it. And I was like, oh my God, but how can I reconcile what I'm seeing with what other people are saying? And it was literally like there were 2 parallel kind of timelines of experience being lived at that point, which started to crack me open and make me begin to question, like, what is real, right? If this is my experience and someone else is having a very different experience, what even is real anymore, right? And then you enter into understanding the matrix we live in and the world being kind of a stage, essentially, right? And it just kind of shatters paradigms of belief that we've had, if you start to open yourself up to that. And I want to say that because if is a big part of it. Not everybody is questioning things, or they are, but it's within the box of their current belief set. So it's kind of this reinforcing cycle of this echo chamber, essentially. Um, and to really, begin to expand out of that, I'm reading a book called Mind Hacking Happiness. And he talks about how we have the little self, which is our ego and our identity, right? So our little self is, I'm Angie. I was a hospice nurse. I'm a business owner now. I'm a mom. I have, short hair. I have all these like characteristics about me. And we identify with them, right? Because they make up the totality of our humanness here, or so we believe. But the big S self, is the spirit and soul. And so we have to kind of begin to detach from our little self into our big self and just observe with neutrality. What are we attaching to? What am I getting emotionally revved up by and why? What about that is triggering within me, right? Because it's a perception, it's a belief, it's something that on a subconscious level we identify with. And and again, on a bigger scale, we're seeing cognitive dissonance left and right because people's perceptions of themselves are being attacked when their politics are attacked, or their religious beliefs they perceive are being attacked, or something else, their gender, whatever. And so to begin that process really is to step into a place of neutrality and just curiosity, like, hey, what about this? Am I feeling triggered by? Oh, I feel like there are crimes against humanity playing out and I have to take a stand. Well, what's even deeper than that? Well, how I grew up. I grew up in a very Christian home, and that means that I care for people and I care for things. And so, directly and indirectly, my religious beliefs are being attacked by, what I believe is happening in the world. So you kind of start to unravel your own psyche a bit when you understand what is that that's triggering you truly, because it's not the surface level thing ever. It's the subconscious, that small self that we're identifying with. And so, before I go too far, because I know there's a lot here we could talk about, this is what we're seeing on a mass scale. And again, the making of a tyrant speaks to the more we divide people, the more we can conquer. Unified, we are a powerful force. And I had this conversation, a week or two ago with a client, and I had said that, you and I believe the light will always win. Always. I don't understand what's happening in the world fully because I just can't have all the information. It's just not possible. However, in my spiritual growth and in my journey, I have always believed and seen that things always work out for the highest good, always. And I mean, you can talk, biblical, you can talk about Buddhistic beliefs, like the force greater than us that governs love on this planet always wins. The dark will not stand a chance. And, people can look at that as spiritual bypassing, but the reality is that that's just my belief. And if you want to argue, that's okay. I'd rather be believing in the hope and optimism of humans than the darkness. So with this conversation with this client, I had said that I truly believe, inherently, that the majority of people at the end of the day want the same things. We want to feel safe. We want to live prosperous, long lives. We want to feel, healthy and cared for. And this person had a very different belief that there is inherent evil on this planet. And to me, I'm like, oh, that's such a sad way to view the world, because on a psychological level, that comes from trauma. That comes from how you were raised. You know, Evil kids aren't born, evil babies. You see a beautiful newborn baby. There is nothing within that little child that's inherently bad or evil. It's the shaping of their brain, the environment they're raised in, that creates that within them. And so it's just like molding clay, with little kids. We get to mold these little beautiful minds into things that maybe aren't of the light, but it's not because they are evil. It's because of the environment that shaped them. And again, I'm open to that being a conversation of a different viewpoint, that maybe there is inherent evil here to mess with us. I don't know. I've thought about that. Like maybe, to kind of throw a little bit of excitement in planet Earth, there's these forces that are here just to mess with us. That's possible. That doesn't allow me to feel elevated, remain high vibrational, or in a place that allows me to do good when I stoop to that level. I mean, all of these things affect our frequency too. So if I'm out there believing the world is inherently bad and all these things are happening, I am dropping my frequency so fast. I can't impact positive change when I'm at that level of anger and hatred. I'm
Mhm.
so much better when I am in a space of love, and how can I be of service?
Yeah. Yeah. Confusion is the name of the game. And so here's what's hard about the time that we're in with the division. Being somebody who has been in narcissistic relationships, I have a deep understanding because it's been part of my healing journey, like understanding what the traits are, understanding what a trauma bond is, understanding how it happens. So I've compared this often to we are in kind of like the greatest narcissistic relationship in the world, where we as human beings, we want to feel safe and secure. And so we look to this government system, whatever it is, to keep us safe and secure. You're going to protect our borders. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And so they get you in by, the whole problem, reaction, solution cycle. And then, you know, like in an abusive relationship, there's a cycle to that too. And so it happens with like meeting your needs. It's like love bombing, right? We're going to give you things. And then, tension starts to build somewhere, and then there's an episode of abuse. And we watch the same pattern happen, and we're like, we're done with you. And then they come back and they're like, wait, I have something for you. Right? You're okay here. This is safe. Same thing plays out. What that does to us is it creates cognitive dissonance. It creates a trauma bond, and we can trauma bond to anything that puts us through the cycle because we are continuously pulling the lever on the slot machine, waiting for that win again, waiting for that win. I'll just stay through all the trauma and hell they put me through. We get in this situation. What happens is we hold these two opposing ideas simultaneously, like they're bad and they keep us safe. So they're two very opposite ideas. And in that, we become very confused, very confused. Confusion is the name of the game. Everything is about confusion. And what's really, really hard is getting clear about that, because the problem is, and again, the problem is always what they're going for. It's recognizing that and just saying this is being done intentionally.
Mhm.
Somebody is doing this to us with intention. That's a hard thing for good humans to understand, but why would they do that? I wouldn't do that to somebody. That's evil. That's cruel. It's being done to you intentionally because you need to stay under control. And so it's breaking down the human psyche. They did experiments on people back during the Nazi era. This is why they want to know how to do it. Again, a prisoner who doesn't know they're a prisoner is the best prisoner. So they keep you confused. They keep you in this cycle. Where it gets even more nefarious is that then they create all the consumables and they push it out via the news, via the internet, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and they make you their flying monkeys because you have unhealed stuff and you're just prime for it. So you're their slave. You're their lackey. You're doing their work. And, when it comes to like good versus evil, I'll share with you my personal beliefs. I believe both forces exist. I believe the Bible, but I also believe it was plagiarized. I really am more in tune with Gnostic texts, the Apocrypha, things like that. I believe that. I believe everybody has a choice to believe in what they want. But what I've always understood is that let's just call the negative entity Satan, which there's Satan, Lucifer, and they're all different. That's just beside the point. The greatest deception is either believing they don't exist or believing that that is greater than God. That's the deception. There's a Bible verse that says, "He who lives in me is greater than he who lives in the world." So if this realm is truly Satan's, then it's fake. It's a mirror image that's incomplete. So when you fully understand that, you are now not bypassing. You are coming out of confusion. You're exiting the abusive relationship with the system that is designed to keep you trauma bonded in it. It's a cycle, it's a brain pattern. And the only clarity you're ever going to have is when you step out of it. That's going to be your peace. It's the peace that passes understanding. It's coming through the other side and saying, I see you. I see what's happening over there. But I know that if I feed the loosh, if I give my energy into that, I'm going to perpetuate it. So my greatest strength is by focusing on the good over here and making that bigger and let it grow so it swallows up the dark. And the other thing about it is when you're in social media, the more you feed into, it feels good. It feels good to us to like get in there and just be like, oh, I got one, like I have a zinger, I have a truth. We're feeding the propaganda machine that is designed to be our demise. It takes a lot of control of the flesh to be able to say, you know what, that isn't actually the world I want my kids to live in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to step out of the game. I'm not going to play it. I'm going to turn the TV off. You're really good about that with your kids, like the electronics, the television. My kids are older. I didn't know this back then, but if we start to limit how much we're allowing in,
Mm-hmm.
and just realizing that this is like junk food for our brain. It's actually doing so much more harm to our spirit, our chemicals in our body. It's hurting our physical body, our spiritual body, and it's making us a slave for a system that has nothing but our end in mind.
Yeah. And it brings to mind the Martin Luther King quote, right? That darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate
Thank
cannot
you.
drive
Yeah.
out hate, only love can do that. And when I see people just getting so emotionally upset, you're buying into the same energy that's keeping us stuck. And again, to some people, they're like, that's spiritual bypassing. I firmly disagree. When you study David Hawkins, the different levels of consciousness, right? Christ consciousness is not focusing on driving out darkness. It's about expanding light. We do that by healing the wounds in ourselves that are triggered. We do that by being a force for good in this world, by loving our neighbor, by helping those who need our support, not by posting mindlessly on Facebook your anger about what's happening in this world. You're perpetuating in that darkness. And that is something I think that's very twisted within the spiritual community because people see that as bypassing when it could not be further from the truth. It's just that that's a very different way of thinking that we're not indoctrinated to think because it doesn't serve the agenda when we are in our power. And to your point about being imprisoned, when we are getting emotionally fed up into all of the things happening, we are staying imprisoned. To liberate ourselves is to step back into that bigger self, that big S self, and say, all right, what's happening here? Let me observe from a high level what's happening within my little self, within the world. And how can I show up in a way that enhances the love on this planet and doesn't, feed into the negativity? And, I think there are a lot of people that truly believe, well, I'm standing up to the atrocities. How is that not love? You're fighting fire with fire. You're not transcending that. And that's the thing is you have to transcend that level to begin to make the shift. And, it's unfortunately become such a I don't even know the words to kind of speak to this, but it's become such a thing in especially politics. If you're not with this one side, then this means XYZ about your character. And likewise, the other side, same thing. It means this about your character or, your intelligence. And it's like, this isn't a side. This isn't a political sided thing. This is humanness being humans and us trying to figure out our ways, but also break out of the prison that's kept us stuck here. And so, when people really want to get upset and say, don't you care about what's happening in other countries? Of course. Yes, I'm a human and I want humans to thrive. And me getting upset though, I can't do anything about it. It's not to say I'm turning a blind eye, but what is a Facebook post going to do? Right? If I'm just out there spewing my emotions, I'm spreading negative energy. I'm spreading low vibrational BS, and I will not stoop to that level. I'm not going to engage in that. And it's not helping us move forward. If you're an activist and you're taking action, super, that is awesome. And that maybe is your calling. And I support you with whatever you feel compelled to do. But there are a lot of people who have this righteousness that believe that just because they're posting stuff from any political angle, this is not from one side or the other, that, they're spreading good. But I see a lot of people on the right spreading some hate too, and, calling people sheep and all this stuff. So it's not a left or a right thing. It's humans being immersed in their ego and, wanting you to stoop to that level of ego with them. And that's not helping us move ahead at all. And, I think back to, even the Bible quotes about, I forget where it was, if it was Revelations or what, but it spoke to the chosen ones, and I think the number was 144,000 chosen ones. And now that speaks to getting to a level of Christ consciousness that, I'm not there. I don't know if you're there, but I will not be a Jesus this lifetime. That's not what I am here to do. But humanity is rapidly evolving to where there are people that are like that with their level of love and beingness that are shifting the pendulum. And there's also again, in David Hawkins' books, he speaks to the teeny percentage of population it takes to create shift. How, they've done studies on this, focused meditations, just a small fraction of people doing a focused meditation on safety and love in a certain population, within a city, that the crime in that city drops or like stops for the time of that meditation. Now, when it's done, it picks back up. But that speaks to the power of, focused intention, focused high vibrational energy. And that's what's going to drive this out. It's not going to be the continual focus on the clickbait crap we're being shown. And how fast, we're just like rapidly getting immersed with information. And there's so many people I see on social media who are making a career out of giving you breaking news every second of the day. We don't need that. That's keeping us trapped in this fear cycle that, we've never had access to information at the speed. And it's also making us forget about other really important things. It's kind of like wave the false flag over here so you're not paying attention to what's happening over here. And there's whiplash left and right. So none of us have any idea what we're even like paying attention to or what we really need to be paying attention to, because there's so much conflated information out there that's just, it's hard to even know truth, and that's what you and I talk about, like, what is truth anymore? We just don't have quality information. And you can look at the books, and this is a space of contention with my husband and I. He has studied history, and he is a big advocate for educating yourself about history. History repeats itself, all this stuff. I am to the point in my journey where I question what the books even say, just like the Bible, right? We get the information they want us to know and hear. So how much of this is even true information about our own history? And right, you could be like, oh my God, you're so far down the conspiracy rabbit hole. Well, yeah, when you start to wake up and research the level of just crap that is so inaccurate and conflicted over the years, you do start to question everything. And that's where, cultivating discernment is powerful, but you have to clear the clutter of your mind first to truly have a clear discernment. Intuition is based on your own perceptual lens. So that's why you and I could be experiencing the same event and have two very different intuitive pings on it, because we are heir to being human. And so in order to release that, meditation is a powerful way to just begin to clear the monkey mind, clear the mental clutter, and begin to just kind of step into that bigger S self.
Yeah. It's I think you and I had talked about it a while ago that you're we can meet a lot of people that claim to have discernment about the situation, but it's the purity of our vessel that's going to bring us to the cleanest discernment. And that's not just food, right? That is, what are your practices daily? What are you tuning into daily? What are you doing both in your physical body, your spiritual body, your mindset? And I can tell you that if you're participating actively in these divisive type narratives, you're probably full of clutter in there and your discernment isn't going to be accurate. That's a big thing. And, in working with leaders, it's interesting because a lot of what I do professionally mirrors, again, everything is interlaced. And when I talk about leadership, there's that old model of force, coercive control, fear, ego. It's very narcissistic, which is kind of a buzzword these days, but there are traits. And it's getting what you want through means of coercive control. That's the old paradigm for leadership. That's the old way. And it was taught. It was a patriarchy. It was just a way that it was done. And we're changing. And so if you want to be part of that change, you got to look at leadership differently. You got to be the person that is going to inspire other people. We don't inspire people by attacking them. We don't inspire people by living exactly like we're telling them not to live. We inspire people by digging in, by growing ourselves, by showing up differently, by breaking the pattern, and showing people the results of that, the fruit of that. That could be that it's challenging and you have to sit in that. It could be that you're experiencing financial prosperity and you're still a really good human. It's not off the coattails of somebody else. So that whole saying of be the change you want to see in the world, it goes right back to that. You have to think about that if you really want to level yourself up. If you really want to see the world change, it's got to start in you. So if you don't want division and war and famine and poverty and racial tension and wars against people of different genders or sexual preferences, any of that, you you have to show up in the most loving, kind way. And that is not by attacking somebody who doesn't think the same as you.
Well, and it's
It
also
might
not
be that you walk away. It might be
correct.
that you don't give it attention anymore.
Right. You start just like a fire, you starve it of the oxygen.
Right.
And it's also to not jump to conclusions just because someone voted differently than you or they have, something else that triggers you. Don't make a cascading assumption that it means XYZ about the rest of their beliefs because there is a reason every single one of us have the belief sets we do. Again, it goes back to the way we were raised, our perceptual filters, our lived experiences, and no two people on this planet will ever have the same lived experiences. Thereby, again, it makes sense why all of those viewpoints are valid and it doesn't take away from your experience. And I think, that is the victim culture we're cultivating here is, if you're not for us, you're against us. And I've seen so many people even just bring about, like the ideologies of Nazis, that certain populations of people are identifying with that culture. And I'm like, that is so unfair to make such a big assumption about people because of how they voted or didn't vote or whatever. That's a big jump. And I remember in 2020 when everything was getting really heated. And again, I was in the throes of my own kind of existential crisis because all this stuff was happening and there was a lot of noise that was hard for me to kind of figure out what truth was, and I think we're still learning what truth is as information's coming out. And even that, you still got a question. So I remember having a conversation at a bonfire with a person. So the majority of us had kind of one political affiliation back then. One person very openly, and I don't mean that like she wasn't rude, she was openly very different in her political affiliation. And I could see the other women getting so upset. Like they were so upset by this person having a different opinion. And I was intrigued. I was like, thank you for talking about this. Like, can you tell me more about, what you believe or what you're seeing within this perspective? And it was the most kind conversation. And they were so open and I was very open about my beliefs and what led me to what I at that time thought. And as we were leaving, again, there was tension in the air from some of the people. And as this person and I were walking to the car, we turned and we were like, thank you. Like that was such a valuable conversation. that was truly open-hearted and truly received through the lens of I wanna understand. Like, I may not agree
Me too.
still, but I wanna understand. And that was kind of my first exposure to, like, dipping your toes in the pond to a different belief and having it be received well, having it be a genuinely loving conversation. And that's what I think you and I do all the time, which is where I love to banter with you about different things because sometimes we do have different, things that we believe or lived experiences. And it's like, cool, help me understand that more. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense based on like what you've been through. Now, again, the majority of people don't have the capacity to kind of even think outside the realm of their thought. And I don't say that, as a an insult to anybody, but it goes into the deep personal work you and I have done to deconstruct every area of our life. The masses haven't done that. And that's where, the people that are listening to this will be people that are understanding because they are on the personal development path. And so if any of that triggered you, I just would encourage you to kind of be with that and see what about that is upsetting. But the masses aren't thinking about these things, it is about self-preservation, and that is the name of the human game, is self-preservation, but that's all tied to ego. And so, when you look at any ascended master out there, they speak to transcending the ego. And, again, you said, be the change you want to see in this world. It starts within. And I had somebody challenge me on that. Well, how can you say it starts within when there's war all over the place and this, that, and the other? It's like, well, higher level conversations here. Like, it does start within. All of us have to do that work because one elevated vibration has the capacity to impact a massive amount of people around them. And so that is the journey that we are all being called to do, which brings it back to us. None of us are victims. We all have a choice.
And let's talk about that elevated vibration because that's the whole point. So if you're sitting here and you're thinking, but I want to be a positive influence on this type of bad thing that's happening, like I want to be a voice for it, I want to, whatever. The thing you just said, think about this. If you really do believe in that chart of vibration, and hope and joy and love are way at the top, and anger is kind of in the middle, so anger isn't actually that inappropriate, but then you get down to like fear, grief, shame, loathing, all those are very low. So this is why fire kind of a thing. So if you have people doing heinous things and you come in and you match their energy, this is the vibration. We are making just more of that. That's the world has been trapped in that. I feel bad for the people, the enlightened people that have come before us, because they had quite the work cut out for them. They probably were very lonely. So this is why you have to be the change, because the vibration of not living in fear and living in hope and trusting in the greater light, especially if you're a spiritual person, not buying into the propaganda machine of, I'm sorry, like an apocalypse and this horrifying rapture. That's, to me, that's all BS. I'm sorry if that's what you believe. I don't believe that because I think that's Satan's game. I think that's the dark game. I would rather live in the vibration that Jesus walked in. He transcended all of that. He literally taught us how to walk between heaven and earth and be part of the world, but not be of it, creating more division, creating more of that dark energy. That's where we win. That's
Well,
where this all changes.
even his dying words, forgive them for they don't know what they've done, or they
Yeah.
I forget how it's phrased, but
Yeah.
Father, forgive them for they not know what they've done.
Yep. What they've
And it's
done.
like that is people, like,
Yeah.
forgive the people that are out there doing, engaging in massacres. They don't know what they're doing. Maybe you could say yes they do, but they don't realize we are one collectively. Like, you are my sister, they are my brother. We are all unified and connected in this matrix, in this quantum field, and just these little fractals of each other experiencing
Yeah.
life, right? There is a fractal of me that is the war person. There is a
Mhm.
fractal of you that probably somewhere along the lines committed some heinous act too. Like, that is a part of all of us. And if that doesn't make sense, again, maybe you're not totally ready for this content, but It is understanding, the things that we do to our sisters and brothers are thereby an attack on ourselves. And, I very much believe in karma, and I've seen karma play out in real time, and it is wildly interesting. And karma's not bad. Karma is doing unto others as you've had, as you would have done unto you. And good or bad, you're going to get that back. And what side of the fence do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the one perpetuating love, higher vibration, unity, or do you want to be the one out there screaming fear in the streets and dragging everybody into the mud with you? I don't want to be there. You and I escaped that a while ago, and not that we don't get caught up in it on occasion, but we very quickly reground, find our stance, and then continue on. And I will tell you, my life and those around me have gotten exponentially better in taking this, and it's not. I will say this 10,000 times over. It is not burying your head in the sand. It is being aware of what control we have. And it literally is just my tiny ecosphere. I don't have control on the big matrix around me, the world around me. I can only control myself, and I can influence those I have the relationship with, maybe, but that's about it. So, I'm not on a stage where I have the influence of someone like a president or a world leader. That's not what I'm here to do. But that's not necessarily also how change happens. It comes back to all of us wanting that, and all of us really understanding the mind control tactics that are being put in place to keep us small, to keep us angry at each other and in those negative feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. If we want to change, we're never going to change anybody's mind through force and matching their low energy. And that's what's harder. The flesh wants to do that, but that is where we know we have healing to do. It's when you can just say, I'm not going to engage in that. And you stop playing, and it becomes a less popular game to play. It lets people be their own echo chamber, and that's where people start to go, huh, you know what, this is very isolating, maybe I need to do that work. So that's the hard work of this is such a great conversation. And I would say, if people have questions or comments about this, we are so open to that. I think the more people that talk about this, the greater the result is going to be. Let's have the discussions here about what we can do individually to impact the collective, because again, divided we fall. We know this. History has shown us that. We've been told that. It's united we stand. And that is way more than just politics or a country pride slogan. That is truly humanity. United we stand. We weren't meant to be divided. We're weak there. So, well, thanks again for another great episode. And until next time.
See you later.
Bye, guys.